The Marvel's Avengers video game has been out for several months now. The game, developed by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics, was first released on September 4th, 2020. And if you're familiar with my YouTube or my Twitch channel, you know that I have a great affinity for the game. And as the title suggests, I do love this game. But I wanted to give myself as much time as possible with the game before I decided to put out a full review. Both because it's a live service game, and I wanted to see what content, if any, was released over the last couple of months, but also just so I could feel comfortable with my feelings on the game. So today, I'm finally going to review the Marvel Avengers video game.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another carrotscraps video, and by another, I mean the 50th! Woo! Woohoo! I've made 50 YouTube videos. And with 50 YouTube videos comes a pretty lengthy disclaimer about the video. But I swear it's a fun disclaimer that celebrates 50 videos. Not really. So, this is a review of the Marvel Avengers video game, and I'm gonna save you a lot of time and give you my general thoughts on the game up front. Yes, the title suggests I do love the Marvel Avengers video game, and essentially my number one reason for me loving it is that I give it a fun out of 10, and that's pretty important to me. I'm only putting this here because I feel like I rambled a lot in this video. I take a lot of time to criticize the game while also challenging criticisms from other players, and I had a lot of fun getting into the nitty-gritty of my feelings on the game. But before I started the video, I just wanted to say that my feelings ultimately are very simple on why I love the game. If you didn't enjoy the game, I completely understand, and I hope you found another game that is more worth your time. But yeah, like I said, I think the game is a lot of fun, and now I'm going to talk about why I think it's fun. Anyway, with that being said, I'd like to say that I'm specifically talking about the original build of the game and not future updates or DLCs that have been released since. In addition, I'd like to correct several mistakes that I made during this video. I make this correction in the interest of transparency and honesty, and because I'm too lazy to re-record those segments. Anyway, for some reason I referred to the game by the wrong title several times throughout the video, and I apologize for this error, and I hope it doesn't affect the experience.
Also, my audio quality fluctuates throughout the review, so I hope that's okay.
So I hope you enjoy listening to me ramble about a game that I love. But before I get into the reasons why I love it and criticize the things I don't love about it, I'm going to explain in excruciating detail exactly what this game is, in case you're watching this video in the distant future of March 2021, when this game has been forgotten by time thanks to Skynet or Cyberdyne or something like that. He's like in a, you know who Tony Stark is? He's in like a cool armor right now. No, he's the... I could see how you would think that. No, he's normally wearing stupid armor. It's all red and yellow, but now he's wearing like white and like gold. I mean, it's kind of chrome, so it's cool. He's going to space. Yeah, so it makes it better. So first things first, Marvel Avengers is a looter brawler video game with optional single player and multiplayer experiences offered to players. The single-player story allows you to play as all of the Avengers, but focuses its narrative on the young Kamala Khan, whose new powers emerge after a catastrophic accident caused by the Avengers. Shortly after this catastrophe, Kamala must reunite the Avengers to take down AIM and liberate the Inhuman species. The Inhumans being the new superhuman species that Kamala finds herself a part of. Combat is very similar to other recent superhero games. Like other action brawler RPGs, combat is centered around a light and heavy attack mixed with a dodge and parry. The two details that make this game distinct from its contemporaries is its live service model, it being a game that you can play online at any time, and the ability to play as multiple characters. Developers of the game have persisted that the first week of launch and the main story are just the beginning of the game, and they've said on multiple occasions to stay tuned for what they have in store for the game in the coming weeks, months, and even years. Post-game content seems to be centered around leveling up a specific character's level or power, with future content being new playable characters, stories, and missions added to the game. Character customization and progress are centered around skill points, which are earned when you level up a character, and character-specific gear, which serves to increase a specific character's power level. Gear is specific to each character and is split into 4 pieces, with 3 additional artifact sections. This gear cannot be shared between characters and is found randomly throughout the world. As you level up and your power rises, you'll collect more significant gear. You can also purchase gear through various vendors in the game. You can only store a limited amount of gear at a certain time, and disassembling gear will give you resources that you can use in various ways. One of the ways you can use resources is to boost a gear's power level several times. As mentioned earlier, you gain 1 skill point every time you level up. There are 3 pages of the skill tree, and on each page are 3 sections, adding up to 9 sections where you can dedicate skill points to customize your character. While each character has a level cap of 50, which determines how your character will play, all 6 characters also have a power level that is separate from their standard level. This power level determines the specific character's damage output and is upgraded by equipping certain pieces of gear. The power level cap at launch is 150. Developers have stated that 150 is going to be the cap at launch, suggesting that the power level will be increased as time goes on. If rumors, leaks, and bugs are to be trusted, the power level can go over 9,000. Jokes aside. Multiplayer is simple, allowing you to play with friends or strangers in groups of 4. Each player can only choose one of 6 characters per team and cannot double up. Miss Marvel, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Captain America, and Black Widow are the base game's 6 playable characters, with more DLC characters coming in the future. And most missions offer the ability to play single player or online. If you're not playing with other people, you can play with up to 3 AI companions. These AI will be your personal AI companions that reflect your time played with those specific characters. They will be wearing whatever cosmetics you've put on them and be at the level that you've grinded them to. And that's about everything you need to know about the Marvel Avengers video game at this point in time. Now, with that out of the way, let's move into a discussion about my feelings on the game.
We should take out one of these planes. Go for a ride. Surely, as Avengers, we can just take the keys and fly for a little bit. Save the world like a dozen times. Maybe I should be allowed to drive a jet when I feel like it, huh? You saying I can't drive the jet? Do you realize how much gamma power I have? I made this team what it is.
So when it comes to people who talk about the game positively, the number one praise that I've heard from a lot of people is the story. It seems a lot of people really love the story of Marvel's Avengers. And to be completely honest, I don't hate the story. I'm not saying it's the worst thing ever. It's just the story of Marvel's Avengers isn't what captivated me about the game. To me, it's a very simple and generic superhero story. It doesn't really break any ground when it comes to its plot or its antagonists. And again, it's not bad. I don't think this is an awful story. I read plots like this all the time when it comes to comics. I was just confused that so many people were so excited about the story mode in the game when it really wasn't the most exciting thing to me. It had some really cool moments. One of my favorite parts is when, spoiler, I don't know if you're worried about spoilers, but spoilers. One of my favorite parts of the game is when Tony Stark goes to space to find Captain America. It's a really awesome, amazing set piece. It's probably my favorite part of the game. I love the build up with Tony's new armor, and I really love finding Captain America as this kind of surprise, and then getting to play as him was really exciting. But overall, it's not a story that I would tell people is super interesting. I also think part of the reason why I'm not as enchanted by this story is that I've seen the Inhuman Terrigen Mist story told many different ways over the past couple of years. I read it when it was originally in the comics, I've seen it in cartoons and in other TV shows. It's a storyline that I've seen a lot of times at this point, and so I'm not necessarily shocked or impressed whenever I see it now. It's definitely a good version of that story, but maybe to people who haven't heard that story before, this is a really more striking series of events, you know what I mean? But let's transition from that into something that I do like about the game, and something that I do like about the story. So when I say I don't like the story, I'm talking about the story events, I'm talking about the plot and the conflict as the story goes on. But one of the strengths I see in the main campaign is characterization. The best thing that the Marvel's Avengers story has going for it is the way the characters act and the way that they interact with each other. One of the other big praises I've seen from a lot of people who seem to really enjoy the game is that they really like Kamala Khan. Similar to the Inhuman Terrigen Crisis, Kamala's been in comics for years and has been in multiple other multimedia shows and video games, so I've been exposed to the character for a while. And I'm really happy that she got this AAA treatment and that so many people are being exposed to her for the first time. Getting TV shows and movies is how characters who would originate in the comics would go on to be pop culture juggernauts like Spider-Man, which I hope that Kamala Khan will be in the future. But unlike my criticisms of the Inhuman story, Kamala is treated very differently in this story. Yes, she has all the dorky and quirky dialogue, but at the same time, I feel like she's characterized slightly differently than she has been in the past. Specifically, I really love Kamala's connection with Bruce Banner, the Hulk. Listen, I'm a huge comic book fan, and while I love the MCU movies, I can't really say that I'm a fan of the movies. They're enjoyable to watch, but I prefer the canon of the comic books. When I first saw the Marvel Avengers video game promoted, I wasn't really interested because I thought it was just going to be a ripoff of the movies. But once they started showing more characters like Kamala Khan, MODOK, and the Inhumans, that's when I started to get more interested in the game. But I still harbored doubts that it was going to be just another MCU clone. And like all MCU clones, Tony Stark tends to be the main character of a lot of the modern Marvel Avengers content. I was very worried that Kamala Khan was going to get the Peter Parker treatment from Homecoming and that Tony Stark was going to be her mentor. But to my surprise, she gets the mentor treatment, but instead from Bruce Banner. Not only was this a really exciting prospect for me, but it was a completely accomplished goal in my opinion. They really explored the relationship between these versions of the character very well. Kamala is somebody who looks up to her heroes and idolizes them, and Bruce is somebody who harbors a lot of guilt about what he's done and about who he is. The child who looks to the next generation for advice, and the next generation who looks to the previous generation with shame. It's a really, really interesting chemistry that the two of them make. And it's not a ripoff of the MCU continuity, and better than that, it's almost completely original to this version of the game. Look, I may love the comics, but when it comes to new media interpreting Avengers and Marvel heroes, I want new content more than anything else. I would love to see stories interpreted like the Inhumans plot that I've mentioned already, but I get way more excited when I see brand new concepts and stories explored with these characters. So again, I can't say it enough, Kamala and Bruce's chemistry is fantastic. Now, I don't think it's a secret to anyone who's played the game that Kamala seems to be the main character. And while some disagree with that decision, I think it's a great idea. One of the best reasons to make Kamala the protagonist of this story is the fact that the story is about reuniting the Avengers. And who better to reunite and rejuvenate the Avengers than an Avengers fan? Not to mention the fact that fans are playing this game, and it feels cool to play as a character who loves the Avengers as much as you do. And even putting those reasons aside, I just think that Kamala is a really energetic and fun character. Kamala has so much life, joy, and conflict throughout the events of the game, and it's really interesting to see her react as story events unfold. So yes, while you can play as 6 characters in this game, Kamala is definitely the protagonist of the story. But I would also argue that Bruce Banner gets almost as much screen time in the game. From my observation, Bruce and Kamala are almost like parallel protagonists. You're supposed to experience the events of the story through both of them and contrast how they feel about certain events. I think this is made obvious by the fact that Bruce and Kamala both have their own side characters that provide different sources of drama. Kamala when she interacts with her father, and Bruce when he interacts with the villain who is also his former partner. From my observation, they're the only 2 protagonists that go through an arc throughout the game, and to drive that point home, they're the only 2 protagonists that have their own side characters to bounce their ideas off of. Tony has a minor arc in the game, and you find out some cool stuff about the other Avengers, but overall, they're mostly one note. Most of the other characters are really cool to see, but you really don't get to explore them as much as you do Kamala and Bruce. And so that's why I think the relationship between Miss Marvel and the Hulk is one of the best things about the story and the game overall. While I just gushed about how awesome Kamala and Bruce's relationship is, it is worth mentioning that it's kind of disappointing that we don't have more story with the other Avengers. I will say they all have their little moments, but they are only just these little fleeting moments. The minute they mentioned Tiny Dancer, I knew it was Black Widow, and I was excited when they revealed her, but it didn't feel like they really did much with it. Like I've said, rescuing Cap from space is one of the coolest moments in the game, and I actually really like the mystery of whether he was tricked or whether he intentionally let MODOK go. The more I think about that, that's another quality footnote in the game's story. Thor has a really great introduction, but we really don't get to see that much of him after that. I just felt like, especially for a video game, the story could have gone on just a little bit longer, so we can explore some of these other characters. At the end of the day, the Marvel Avengers main campaign rounds out at about 10 to 13 hours depending on how you're playing. It's relatively short when compared to other games' main stories. Now, like I've said, I enjoy the main story, but I don't think it's the main part of the game. When it comes to longevity, the amount of time you spend playing the game will be grinding these multiple characters. But I wish we either had more side content for the main 6 characters, or we had more moments for those characters in the main storyline. I'm not saying all games need to be extremely long, but for a game featuring an ensemble cast, it felt like a missed opportunity not to have more moments with the Avengers we love so much. I'm sure a lot of people watching this review get a little bit scared when you hear something like a 10 to 13 hour game. But as I just mentioned, I think you can get a lot of time out of this game when you're not talking about the main campaign. Now, while most of the gameplay in the main story is similar to other missions that you'll see throughout the rest of the post-game, there's a lot of things I appreciate about the gameplay of the story versus the gameplay of the post-game. For example, I really like the banter between all of the Avengers, especially at the end of the game. I know it's meant to illustrate how these team members have come together after so much time apart, but I'd love to hear more scripted sequences like that. I also really like the opportunities that the game gives you to explore certain environments, like Kamala investigating an empty helicarrier, or Tony Stark exploring his old mansion. There's a couple of moments throughout the story where you can play as a character and just explore the environment, and it's missing from the post-game, unless you're counting outposts, which I don't. But these are really cool sequences, and I'd like to see them somehow reworked back into the game, especially since you can't replay the story, at least currently. Lastly, while I do wish there was a little bit more put into the level design and the boss battles of the story mode, I actually do like these two details. There are bounce pads throughout various levels that allow you to get to higher heights, and there are really cool, open, expansive levels that allow you to explore in a way that I don't think I get from the missions in the post-game. Also, while the two robotic bosses, the Warbot and like the flying ship, do get repeated in the post-game, I really do like their first appearance in the story, and I think that they're exciting and challenging in the best ways. Spoiler alert, at the end of the game, you do end up fighting MODOK, the main villain of the game, and I really love the arena that they have you fight him and other enemies in. From start to finish, I think it looks really cool and it's really exciting. But MODOK himself is kind of a mixed bag when it comes to being a good final boss. I really like that they try to have every Avenger have their own moment with MODOK, so you get these 6 kind of mini boss battles. But while I appreciate that gesture, only like half of these mini boss battles really flatter the character. Now, I think I've been a little bit tough on the game's main story, considering that the title of the video references the fact that I love this game. Now, this is probably just because I'm very critical of things, even if I enjoy them. But while I do like the story, and I do love these versions of the characters, the quality that first comes to mind when I say that I love the Marvel Avengers video game is the gameplay. Tony just died because you were asking me about presidential candidates. He suffocated in space.
Sounds like that cool suit wasn't so cool after all.
Another one of my big concerns about the game before I played it was that every character was going to play like Spider-Man from the Insomniac Spider-Man game or Batman from the Arkham series. I had this worry because honestly, since the Arkham games, every superhero game has been trying to emulate that very simple but well-polished combat system. But I am very happy to say, while Marvel Avengers does build on the shoulders of giants like Arkham and Insomniac Spider-Man, it does not rip off those games at all. Yes, the combat in Avengers is similar to other superhero games, but it never feels like an exact duplicate. What I'm trying to say is one of the greatest strengths in Marvel's Avengers is that the 6 superheroes you get to play as each are super unique and super fun to play as. They all feel very different from each other, which I think was very important to get me to like the game at least. And I would argue that while the game definitely encourages you to pick a main to grind, the real fun of the game comes from switching between each character. We'll get to this later, but there isn't a lot of variety when it comes to missions, and that can definitely get a little dull sometimes. But what makes the game continuously fun, at least in my opinion, is getting to play as such drastically different characters. Hulk does not feel like Captain America. Captain America does not feel like Black Widow. Black Widow does not feel like Kamala Khan or Thor or anyone. I mean, I could, just say that they all don't feel like each other. You get what I'm trying to say. I really was pleasantly surprised by this, and again, I think it's one of the greatest strengths of the game. I think for a game with a combat style like this, it was very important for them to make each Avenger feel completely different from the other. So, quick recommendation, if you're playing Marvel's Avengers and you feel like the game got a little bit dull, try playing a character you don't normally play as. If you haven't tried playing that already and you've instead just played as 1 or maybe 2 characters, it could add an extra layer to the game that you didn't realize yet. The combat in general is what brings me back to the game. This is probably my #1 positive about Marvel's Avengers. Now, full disclosure, it's not the deepest combat I've ever seen in a video game or an action-adventure game, but I think the combat in Marvel's Avengers is just so much fun. And again, part of that has to do with the fact that I can switch between various characters and get a different experience whenever I want, but each character is so well designed individually. I can put in hours of just one character and have a blast. From getting to learn how to use your shield as Captain America, or getting better with your intrinsic meter as Hulk, there's a lot to think about when playing as a certain character, and there's a lot to learn as the game goes on. I could play a 10-hour story with any one of these 6 characters and have a pretty satisfying experience. And that's based around the fact that their core gameplay is really great, and their skill tree that's introduced makes it that much more fun to explore them and play with them. Recently, I realized that the best way to describe my love for the gameplay and combat in Marvel Avengers
is by calling this a really great arcade game. To me personally, while I do wish that the missions were a little bit more creative, at the end of the day, I enjoy playing the combat more than anything else. And this part of the gameplay, this part of the game is so well polished and so well tuned, in my opinion, that I can just play that for hours. And being in love with the gameplay is the heart of a good arcade game. If that gameplay isn't engaging or interesting or fun to you, you're not going to want to play this same scenario over and over. While the combat in a game like the Insomniac Spider-Man game or in the Arkham Batman games is really great, I don't think that's the main draw of those games. I think both games really try to immerse you in the world of this character, both with story details and with gadgets and character traits. I don't play Arkham Knight or Miles Morales over and over because I just like to punch guys. Even if I've played both stories multiple times, I still love seeing the story over and over. And I know a lot of people list the absence of these qualities from Avengers as a reason why they dislike the game, but from my perspective, I really wanted Avengers to be something unique. I didn't want to play an Avengers game that was basically just a reskin of a Batman or a Spider-Man game. And the fact that they approach gameplay and the core of the game so differently is really appealing to me, because it really serves to separate it from its contemporaries. I really feel like Marvel's Avengers wants me to focus on the combat first and foremost. And luckily they've polished the combat so well that I don't mind playing the game for dozens of hours.
And while I said the gameplay isn't super deep, I also feel like I'm always learning things about how to play the game. For example, when I first started playing the game, I thought dodging and parrying were essentially just interchangeable words. I knew they were two different things, but I didn't think there was really anything that interesting about doing one or the other. But then as the story went on, I realized how different the two mechanics were and how much fun it is to actually get a successful parry on an enemy. It feels really good, in my opinion, to get a good parry. The animation is really heavy and it really feels like you got the jump on the enemy who was trying to attack you. And I feel like I'm always learning new things like that when it comes to the gameplay, whether it's something about the skill tree, or whether it's something about the environment, or whether it's something about just the basic gameplay in general. I will say this about the combat though. I think the combat works really well when you're with a group of AI or a group of players online. However, the story mode will regularly put you by yourself against an army of enemies. And I never felt like this was fair. I always felt like the enemies weren't adjusted to the single player vibe of the game. I would just always get very frustrated in these sections of the game versus the sections where I was playing with other characters. It could just be me, but I just felt like the game is designed to be played with 4 people, and it didn't feel like they adjusted the single player sections to be fair to the player.
This guy is Robot Man.
So let's take a quick break from the review and talk about just a quirky little detail about Marvin's Adventures. Something that I think a lot of players thought was nifty during the beta, but I haven't seen a lot of reviews talk about, is the fact that if you're playing on the PlayStation 4, the backlight of your controller will glow a different color depending on what character you're playing as. Now this happens basically for every game on PS4. The first game that comes to mind is Fallout. If you use a flashlight, the light will glow green on the back of your controller, but I took a lot of time to record the back of the controller, so I thought I'd show it off here. Plus, I like to think that it's these little quirky details that add character to the game. Anyway, with that being said, let's continue my review on Michael's Adventures.
But putting aside my fun feelings about the combat, I suppose I'll call it, there's also RPG elements to this game, and there's this idea that you can kind of customize a character that ends up being different than other players who use the same character online. You can customize your character by using skill points in the skill tree, and then also by using different types of gear. Let's first talk about the skill tree.
Ground shaker? That's what they called me in high school. Because, I had some crazy ideas that were very ground shaking. Hammer strike? That's what they called me in high school. Because I had a lot of ideas that struck people's earth smasher? That's what they called me in high school. And they called me that because I had a lot of ideas that were earth smashing. Now, the gear system in the game is very simple, and we'll get into that later, but I actually think that the skill tree has some depth to it. When you actually take the time to sit down and pick through all of the various options that you can choose for each individual character, I think you'll find that you can make very unique builds for each of these characters. And the idea of having my character change and differ from other players was actually really appealing to me. I didn't always feel this way. I used to think that the skill tree wasn't diverse enough to make a difference between other people's characters, but I've had a lot of time to explore it, and while I don't think it has the greatest depth of a skill tree in a video game, I do think it has enough to be really fascinating. So really quickly, I want to talk about the choices that you have at the master section of the skill tree. Every character has these sections. You have 3 choices in 4 areas of specialty. So in this first category, for example, we can increase our light and heavy combo finishers by 25%. We can increase the stun damage by 15%, or we can increase all ranged attacks by 15%. I really love those options, and just think about that divided 3. Just think about that variety in 12 different sections. When you really get into the mastery page of your character's skill tree, I feel like you really do have a lot of variety to make your character specific. I will admit it took me a while to appreciate how much variety there is, but you really do have a lot of options that range from minor to major variations. And when those minor and major variations accumulate, they make a different character than other people you play with online. And at the very least, if you're only playing by yourself, then it just makes it cool to change up your character and the way they play. I really love the skill tree in the game, and as time has gone on, I've gained a greater appreciation for it. All right, let's help my team now. I was I'm playing online, and I wasn't helping my team that entire time, so I could explain the skill tree. But it takes a lot of work to get to the mastery level of the skill tree, and that work takes the form of a very large grind. It seems like a lot of criticisms of this game are based around the grind. The grind, of course, being the leveling up and stat increases of your character. This is a really odd criticism to me because the grind, in my opinion, is the game. I totally understand if people don't enjoy a grind in a video game. They always tend to be kind of tedious. But if that doesn't sound like something you would enjoy, why would you play the game? When I was watching War Table streams of the game and getting on the hype train, it was made very clear to me quickly that this was going to be an MMO style game. And I got the idea very early on that grinding was going to be a core component of the gameplay. Now, if I could speculate, I think maybe a more accurate portrayal of this criticism is that maybe people think that the grind isn't interesting in this game specifically. That they're not necessarily against grindy games, but that this game's particular grind isn't very engaging. Now, that's a fair point, but again, that's just a matter of opinion, the way I see it. Because sure, the grind is tedious in this game, you're just trying to progress your digital numbers, but you grind by playing the game, by engaging in the combat and fighting enemies. And as I've said before, the combat is the most fun of the game to me. So if I'm grinding by playing a very fun part of the game, then the grind is worth it, in my opinion. I really tried thinking about this criticism in a way that made sense to me, and I think at the end of the day, even in games where grinding is a core component, people are always going to be somewhat critical of it. The first example that comes to mind is Pokemon. Pokemon is a franchise that people absolutely love, and Pokemon fans at this point know what to expect with a new installment. In my opinion, there is no doubt that every Pokemon game is built around grinding, but perhaps the difference between Avengers and Pokemon is that in Pokemon there's a little bit more depth to the grind. Like instead of the grind in Avengers where it's just a really good brawler, in Pokemon there are all these different rock, paper, scissors systems that you have to check to achieve a proper grind. So I suppose people making this criticism about Avengers would cite that Pokemon is a better grind because of that type of depth. So I think that's the fairest way I can characterize this criticism. But even in the case of Pokemon, I know countless diehard Pokemon fans who still complain about the grind, even when they sign up for it, and even when it's considered by many to be a better version of a grind in video games. The idea of doing the same gameplay loop just to increase digital numbers isn't always the most fun. So to wrap this up, I think I'll say that while I totally understand that maybe Avengers isn't the most deep when it comes to how you grind your character's levels, I still personally think that if you buy into the combat and if you enjoy the combat of the game, then it should be fun grinding your characters. If it feels like a chore to grind your Hulk to be very powerful, then maybe Avengers just isn't for you. There are plenty of video games that I want to like, and there are plenty of Marvel games that I want to like, that for whatever reason I just don't end up enjoying. And instead of asking it to change, I just move on and play a game that I enjoy more anyway. So yes, again, to wrap this up, there's a lot of grinding in Avengers, but in my opinion, that's the game. And I like the grind in Avengers because the combat is good. If the combat wasn't good, or if I didn't enjoy the combat, then I wouldn't enjoy the grind. And if you enjoy games where there is a grind, and if you enjoy good combat brawlers, then I think you'll enjoy Marvel Avengers.
How's it going, everyone? My name is the Incredible Hulk, It's very nice to meet you all. Ow! Stop! Thanks, Kamala. You really saved me this time. Now I'm just gonna... You got that, right, Kamala? You just, you deal with whatever's going on over there. I'll, go over here. I like this corner. This corner fits me. I have a larger-than-life personality, but I also have a larger-than-life, body. And this little corner fits me perfectly.
And with that, let's get into another dislike that I have with the game, and that is mission variety. I mean, this one is really cut and dry. There isn't a lot of mission variety in the game. I personally don't mind missions where you have to wait at a certain point, or attack a marked enemy, or destroy certain engines. Those missions are not indicative of a bad game to me. But the issue is that after you've played the game for a while and you realize that those missions are going to be the overwhelming majority of missions that you take on, the game can get a little bit dull. That realization is not super fun. Now, these environments are really detailed and really fun to explore, honestly, but there's just not that much to do. I have a lot of ideas for mission variety, and I think I'll talk about that in a future video and give my recommendations to Crystal Dynamics, and hopefully they'll consider that in the future. But my main point is that the missions that exist in the game aren't awful. It's just when they're the only thing you have to play, and when you have to play them very frequently, that's when it becomes obvious that you need new mission types in the game. And that just takes some creativity. Creativity that I think was really put into designing the characters and how they play, but wasn't really afforded to the mission types. And with that comment, we're going to move into another dislike I have with the game that's essentially the same idea, but this is probably my strongest problem with the game: the lack of content. As a live service game, this game desperately needs new DLC content, and it needs it faster than it got it. Now, to be fair, we are living in a global pandemic. A lot of us have been, living and working in quarantine, and it seems that Crystal Dynamics is the exact same. From what I've heard, they're working in quarantine as well, and it's really difficult for them to work at home without all of the assets that they have when they're in office. And so anybody who has been frustrated with the game and the developers for the lack of content, I would just say, please take that into consideration when making statements or making comments about the lack of content. And my sympathies go out to all of those people working. I know you're working hard, and I really appreciate them and the work that they do on the game, and I can't wait for new content to come. I am not demanding content, but I feel like I do have to highlight that is an issue with the game. It is supposed to be a live service game, and there was just such a long drought of content from September until December, when the first real content actually came out. So hopefully we get more frequent content updates in the future. I'm a huge Fallout 76 fan, and I think they've made a really big recovery in terms of the amount of new story content over time and how frequently it's been released. And I hope the same can be said about Avengers as time goes on. So yeah, my point is, lack of content is one of the biggest problems with the game, specifically post-game content.
All right, let's sneak into this guy's bedroom, steal all his stuff, just make sure nobody's here. All right, we just do whatever we want in here. This tech, I recognize it. This is what's it called? AIM. Tony's the one behind all the AIM robots. And this is bathroom. Tony's the one behind all the bathrooms. Tony's the one behind all the bathrooms. This messy boy needs to make his bed.
Most people who dislike the game seem to think that the live service aspect of it is why the game failed in their eyes. Now, from my perspective, I don't really like live service games either. I don't really like multiplayer games. I don't want an online experience always. So to an extent, I can really understand why people are upset with this part of the game. However, that being said, I decided to give the game a try, and I ended up enjoying the game in spite of its live service aspects. If anything, I'm really excited that I can play this game offline, unlike the other live service game I played, Fallout 76. I guess the way I just feel about this is that so many people talk about the live service aspect of this game as if it's some big secret, and in my head, I can't stop thinking that, if you don't like a live service game, just don't play it. There are plenty of mobile Marvel games that I would love to play, but that I just don't, because I don't want to play a game on my phone. I don't like mobile games, and I really want to play these Marvel games, but I'm just not going to. And while I don't like live service games, for whatever reason, I was willing to give this game more of a shot than any of the mobile games I dislike. I understand that live service is a trend, and I'm not really a big fan of big studios hopping on trends, but just because it's a live service game doesn't mean that the game is destined to fail. The other thing that's interesting to me about people who don't like live service games and insisted that this game would be much better if it focused on story and edited out the live service aspect of the game is that there's already a game like that. If you want a Marvel-themed, story-driven character brawler, why don't you just play Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3? It came out over a year ago, and a lot of people seem to love it. There's a lot of post-game content, although it's paid DLC, and while you can play with your friends, there's no live service aspects to the game. So there you go, problem solved. There are plenty of games that focus on a compelling single-player experience. And there's already a game that focuses on a story-driven multiplayer experience. So this live service Avengers game may be trying to stick to a trend, but it's also the first of its kind when it comes to superheroes, and I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt since there's nothing else to compare it to in the world of Avengers or superheroes. I guess that's just how I feel about it. Quick editor's note, there are and were other superhero MMO video games like DC Universe Online, but I'm specifically talking about a live service game that is an action brawler as well. I know it's a little specific, but that's what I meant. The live service aspect of the game is not something that drew me to Avengers. It's something that I was willing to put up with if the rest of the game was high quality, in my opinion. And lo and behold, I think the game is of high quality, and so the live service aspect doesn't bother me so much. But that being said, while I do have 2 people in my lobby, generally speaking, I rarely find other players to play with. And it's actually a lot of fun to play with other people. It just definitely hurts the live service part of the game when I'm in such long loading screens and such long waiting rooms. You're catching me on an off day. Normally I don't get people in my lobby, you know what I mean? What does host migration in progress mean? This is a good example of another issue with the live service part of the game. Goodbye. Why did it send me all the way back here? Alright, I think it's about time for another break from the review. And while we're on break, I thought it would be a good time to mention the 5 Gum crossover with Marshall's Adventures. So if you're living in the United States and you buy a pack of 5 Gum with the Avengers on them, you'll receive 1 of 8 codes originally. And if you redeem those codes in order, you'll receive a different reward for each code that you input. And you'll only get all 8 rewards if you have 8 codes from 8 packs of gum. These rewards weren't the most important for your gameplay. Some were just cosmetics, some were just in-game microcurrencies, some were just avatars and themes for your PlayStation 4, and they even added 2 rewards with the Kate Bishop DLC. I had a lot of fun with these rewards. I just think it's silly and fun that, you know, Avengers has such a tie-in with gum, so I always like to bring it up whenever I can. I currently have 18 packs of gum that I've been chewing for the past couple of months, and I don't know, it's been an interesting experience. This game is like Banjo-Kazooie. No, Ratchet and Clanks. That's what this game feels like. It feels like Ratchet and Clanks with my little flips. Ratchet was always flipping around, I think. Whoop! Or no, Spy Fox! What other 3D platformers can I name? So I'm not a huge stickler for graphical critiques. When it comes to video games, I'm more interested in having conversations about gameplay rather than the way the game looks. And my general preference for graphics are of a stylized nature rather than a hyper-realistic variety. So I don't feel like I have a lot to say about the graphics in Mitchell's Adventures, but I will say that on a technical side, it could do a lot better. There's a reason why I was excited to play this game on PS5. When playing on the PS4, which is where I played the majority of my gameplay, things would get very choppy and frame rates would slow down regularly. This normally coincided with the amount of enemies on screen. Now, I really wasn't bothered by this, but I do think it's important to mention because I do think it's a technical shortcoming of the game. And it playing better on future consoles is not really an excuse to me. So that's most of how I feel about the graphics in the game, but to talk more about how I feel about the graphics, let's take another productive dip into criticisms about Michelangelo's Adventures. I hear a lot of people mention that the game features knockoff Avengers, and that's one of the main things that upset them about it when they first saw the game. I think this is a really, really odd criticism. So when people say that they look like knockoff Avengers, I'm assuming they're talking about the actors who portray the comic book characters in the MCU films. I mean, I gotta just say, this is one of the most bizarre criticisms I've heard about the game. In my opinion, it's just another form of gatekeeping. People just saying these aren't what the real Avengers are supposed to look like, even though the real Avengers that they're referencing are just other interpretations of the original Avengers. At the end of the day, there are no real Avengers. These are all just interpretations of characters. And the Avengers in the game, they just look like modern versions of the comic book heroes that I constantly read about. There's no part of me that looks at them and is like, oh, this is like that actor who plays Iron Man, or oh, this is like that actor who plays Hulk. I don't know. All I would say to those people is the MCU versions of the characters are not the original versions of the characters. They are also knockoff versions of whatever came before them. And that doesn't make the MCU bad, so that detail shouldn't make the video games bad. For what it's worth, I think the characters in the game look just fine. I think they really rock that middle ground of realistic and unrealistic. I personally like more stylized looking characters. I know a lot of people didn't like Ultimate Alliance 3 because of the way the characters looked, but I think this is a really good compromise in Marvel's Avengers.
What if the Avengers all just switched haircuts? Like Black Widow's hair on Hulk, Kamala's hair on Tony, Tony's hair and facial hair on Thor. We switched top hair and we switched facial hair. That's one improvement for the game. You can have that for free, Square Enix. Just switch the character's hair, and everyone will be very jazzed about that.
This is a really strange place to put my foot down, but one of the aspects of the game that I really dislike and that I think really wasn't as good as it could have been is the photo mode. Now, it's perfectly serviceable. It's not like it doesn't work. You can take some really gorgeous photos in this game, and I've seen tons of people who have. Really talented people that managed to flatter this game with their incredible creativity. Now, I wouldn't compare this game's photo mode to a game like Tsushima. That game really excelled in options and choices when it came to taking photos. But when compared to other games with photo modes, like Spider-Man or Fallout 76 even, I just feel like Maria's Adventures comes up short when talking about settings and photo mode. I mean, at the end of the day, all you really have to play around with is depth of field, a handful of filters, and the ability to rotate the camera. Vital options like turning off enemies or turning off screen effects like being frozen are missing from these settings. So if your character is frozen, then that effect will just stay on the screen. The ability to change facial expressions or poses or to change your costume would be nice. I'd also love the ability to use emotes in the photo mode menu, and stamps and stickers would also be a great addition. Turning visibility off for your other team members is a really great idea, but maybe being able to toggle what characters are on and off would also be really cool. Also, I feel like the camera can get a little cramped sometimes, and I wish you had the ability to pull it back further. I'm sure it's really weird that I'm so critical of the photo mode. This is not the reason why people come to this game. And like I said, it is serviceable. I just think it could be better, and these details really stuck out to me. I was very confused at the amount of options that you had. Another criticism I hear about the game often is that the game has a lot of bugs. Now, full disclosure, I personally did not experience any game-breaking bugs while playing the game. I played on PC and PS4, and the most that I'll say is that occasionally I'd have a character glitch out, specifically in the menus when looking at certain outfits. And also there was an issue with the PC version of the game where if I tried to stream my footage, it would come out all stuttery. So even though there wasn't a lag in game, my stream would make it look like it was severely lagging. And other than that, no other bugs really were severe enough for me to remember and mention. I experienced game-breaking bugs during the beta, but not during the full game. But I've heard a lot of people online talk about how they can't even progress through the story because of some game-breaking bug. While I don't have that experience, to those people, that sounds awful. Crystal Dynamics or Square Enix, I love your game, but certain people can't get through the game that they purchased. If you can find some way to help those players out who are stuck at a specific point in the game, I personally would really appreciate it. It's not fair that somebody spent $60 to play this game, and then for whatever reason the game is preventing them from progressing. And if you dislike the game because of that reason, I completely understand. That's valid, and I'm sorry you're going through that. And I sincerely hope that the developers eventually get back to you and that customer support can help you with whatever issue the game is having. But moving aside from those game-breaking bugs specifically, I wanted to briefly talk about minor bugs. I've had a lot of people mention minor bugs that seem to be their reason why the game is awful in their opinion. And all I can say is that most modern games I've played in the past 2 years have had some bug in the first several hours of my gameplay. For example, when I was playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, which seems to be getting a lot of praise in contrast to Marvel's Avengers, I experienced a brief but significant bug where I had to restart my mission because for whatever reason, all of the characters around me and Miles himself was bugging out. Now that was funny and silly and a little annoying, but I didn't let moments like that affect my opinion on the entire game. As I said earlier, if it's a bug that's so significant that you can't play or progress through the game, that's a different story. But when it comes to these minor, temporary bugs, sure, they're embarrassing or they're funny, but I'm never gonna look at those bugs and be like, this game is awful and it deserves to be buried for this reason. Part of that reason is because I don't develop games, so I can't really offer a solution on bugs like that. But if I held every game up to this standard, that if there's a bug in the game, it's clearly not good, then many, if not most of the modern games that I've played would be considered awful. And I don't think Miles Morales is awful, and I don't think anybody else does. So those are my opinions on the bugs in the game. I really didn't experience many, but even if I did, I wouldn't hold it against the game. How many eyes does a bee have? 250.
Way too much credit.
I don't know, I feel like bees are always watching me. Again, like live service games, I personally don't like the addition of in-game microtransactions either. But that being said, when it comes to cosmetic transactions, they're mostly harmless. For people who say that the microtransactions in this game ruined the game or, destroyed the game, I think that's too much hyperbole. You can play this entire game without ever looking at a microtransaction, and I think that just speaks for itself. If this bothers you, that's okay. I just don't think it affects the main core gameplay. And again, while I'm not a huge fan of it, as time goes on, the way I've started thinking about this is, if people are willing to buy these skins, why wouldn't these developers put them in the game? Sure, a very vocal community of people are against microtransactions in games, especially when it comes to cosmetics online, but there's also gotta be people buying these cosmetics, otherwise they wouldn't keep putting these in games, right? But to play devil's advocate, I will say that these microtransactions are rather expensive, and I personally am not a fan of the variety of skins in the shop. I really think that if they want people to spend money on these skins, they need to do more interesting or more referential skins, in my opinion. On the other hand, for example, I've been playing a lot of Fortnite, and while a lot of people like to joke about the in-game transactions when it comes to that game, I have to say it has one of the best cosmetic shops I've ever seen in a video game. Yes, the cosmetics are really expensive in Fortnite, in my opinion, but the variety of designs and the high quality nature of these skins really does make the price that much more worth it. I can see a lot of work was put into the Fortnite skins, and their high quality nature makes me want to pay for them that much more. And while there are some cool skins in Marvel's Avengers, I just don't feel like on the whole, I get that same high quality vibe from the cosmetic shop in Avengers. See, now this costume is actually one of my favorite Captain America costumes. I think it looks so dope. The black and the red it's just really cool. It's such a different design than you're used to with, Captain America. And I didn't unlock this skin. I got it through the microtransaction store, through credits that Crystal Dynamics gave me for playing the game. But that being said, it doesn't really innovate on the original costume design that much. As much as I love that costume, the large plethora of other skins in the game are just palette swaps and very slight variations of already existing skins. There definitely are cool skins that change things up, but it's not as frequent. For a store that refreshes so frequently, and I love that it refreshes so frequently, I'd love to see more variation than just the palette swaps that we get. But again, there are worthwhile skins in the shop. I love this black and red skin so much. I just want a little bit more, especially for the price. But you can buy more than just skins in the microtransaction shop of the game. You can also get emotes, takedowns, and nameplates. Like I said earlier, I do feel like these are a little overpriced. I do think that most of the emotes are actually pretty cool. I'm just not the market for these kinds of purchases. I feel like somebody who actively buys cosmetic microtransactions in video games would have a more nuanced opinion about this.
but all I can really say is that most of these are too expensive for me to even consider buying them, and I probably like the creativity expressed more in the emotes than I do in the skins themselves. And while we're on the subject of cosmetics in the game, I want to briefly touch on nameplates. In the game, there are these nameplates that you can apply to specific characters to customize your profile. It seems like a lot of people don't really care about this part of the game, but let me just say, it is one of my favorite parts of this game. As a longtime comic book fan, I really love that they've decided to incorporate comic book covers and panels into the game in this way. I get really excited seeing covers I recognize, and specifically seeing covers that I'm like, oh man, I remember buying this, or I have that on my wall, or I have that in my box. It's like a total geek out moment, and it makes me smile, and in my opinion, it's super worth it. Obviously, I don't play the game for the nameplates, and I highly doubt I will ever purchase a nameplate with real money, but I had to talk about how awesome I think the nameplates are, so there you go. Last thing I wanted to mention in this section isn't necessarily related to microtransactions or cosmetics, but it's in the same arena. Like many other modern games, Miriam's Adventures also has a challenge card feature. Each playable character has their own challenge card, and players are encouraged to complete daily and weekly challenges. And by completing these challenges, those points will go towards your challenge card. Every time you rank up or level up, you'll gain a reward, like a cosmetic or some in-game currency, and it's kind of an artificial way of adding content to the game. Now, generally speaking, I actually really like challenge cards in video games, especially games with a repetitive gameplay loop, but again, the challenge card in Marvel Avengers is actually one of the weaker parts of the game for me. I don't dislike that it's included in the game, I just dislike the types of challenges that you're asked to perform. My other 2 points of comparison for games that feature a battle pass or challenge card are Fallout 76 and Fortnite. And in both of those games, I feel like those challenges are either more engaging or less invasive, and the challenges in Avengers range from dull to very out of your way. I hate to say it, but I really never enjoy completing challenges in this game. It always feels like a chore. And I think most battle passes are gonna feel kind of like a chore to some extent, but in my experience, they normally win you over by either rewarding you for stuff that you're already doing, or introducing you to new parts of a map, or new gameplay modes, or new ways to play, so it still feels like you're having fun. I guess at the end of the day, I never feel a sense of accomplishment when I complete a challenge in Avengers, and that's something that I'd really like to see improved in the future. Somebody left a locked box. Allow me to open it and take all the contents inside, even though it doesn't necessarily belong to me. That's just the life of a superhero. What was that? Was that the sound of a box that I can steal the contents of? There's a box over here. It's glowing and it looks expensive. Is it anybody else's? Because I'm about to steal everything inside. I'm a superhero. I'm allowed to steal as long as it's gear. For me. This is mine, even though it's not legally mine, legally speaking. If we're looking at the legal handbook of mines and not mines, that is not legally mine, but, you know, now it is. And I'm going to put it on my body or disassemble it, one or the other. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, I think it's finally time to talk about my final point and my last positive about the game. I don't know why I'm discussing gear at the end of my video instead of, you know, earlier, but, you know, I'll work on structure in future videos. So this is my final positive about the game, and I really do feel positively about the gear system. I will say that my positivity is very simple, and that my critiques and my comments on the gear system is very simple. I think there are way better YouTubers and players of this game who understand gear systems in general, and this gear system specifically, who can talk more detailed. But as for me, the best thing I can say about the gear system in the game is that I get very excited whenever I have an opportunity to get new gear. When I see a chest, I know that there's gear inside of it, and I personally, as a player, get very excited. And to me, that's, you know, the game working. I talked about the grind earlier when we were talking about skill trees, and again, I want to reiterate that I enjoy the grind of the game, and I think grinding is part of the game. While the grind could be a little bit more complex, I don't have any problem with it because I think the combat system carries this long number grind. But essentially, when you're getting new gear, while there are abilities that differentiate the gear and can make your character more specific and unique, at the end of the day, you're just looking for gear with the highest number until you max out that piece of gear.
then you can start to get a little bit more picky about what you want your gear to do. See, most players are just drawn to this very large number, power level 140. That is the level of your gear. But you also have these 3 gear perks below the power level, and then you also have these 3 stats at the top right. You can increase your resilience, your resolve, and your proficiency. See, now this gear is different. It's a lower power level because I haven't had time to boost it, but if you look at the top right-hand corner, it has different stats that it increases than the previous piece of gear I talked about. I feel like these little details go unappreciated by the majority of players, including myself, and the longer that I've had to play with the game, the more that I've been able to appreciate these little details about the gear system. And I feel like I can say that about a lot of the game. It's part of the reason why I wanted to wait so long to finish my review. And I will say that there are some really cool ideas when it comes to gear specific abilities. I really like the gamma energy with certain gear, and I just wish that there was more ideas like this when it came to the broader spectrum of gear. But overall, the gear isn't specific enough for me to say that it's super unique or to say that it's a really high quality system. But another one of the bigger shortcomings of the game is when I'm not incentivized to get this gear, will I be able to continue playing the game? I had a lot of fun on my journey to max out my Captain America, which was the first character that I got to 150. But after I got him to that power level, I found myself wanting to play as the character a lot less. There's still reasons to look for new gear with a maxed out character, but I will say that that does diminish the fun that you have playing them. And it's something that I think should be addressed in the future of the game. You're just on a quest to make your Avenger as insanely Dragon Ball Z overpowered as possible during the end game. There are also multiple vendors in the game where you can actually buy gear instead of searching for it. Now, I really liked this option, and I liked being able to scroll through potential gear and leveling up my character in outposts. But that being said, I don't think that the cost really matched up with what I wanted. It's not like it never happened, but it was very rare when I actually took the time to purchase new gear. I always felt like I was wasting resources and that it would be a better idea to just search for gear on my own. So I do appreciate its presence in the game, but I don't think it's that valuable at the moment. Now, a lot of people really seem to dislike the gear grind in this game. I've heard the game compared a lot to Destiny or Anthem, and all those comparisons seem to say that the game is trying to be a Destiny clone or they've played too many live service games like this already. And right up front, I just want to say I really haven't played that much Destiny, so it's possible the reason why I like the gear grind in this game, whereas other people don't, is because I don't have the perspective that a lot of people seem to have. Other than Fallout 76, this is my first live service game. And honestly, it's one of my first like looter shooter or looter brawler games, you know? But if I can go on just a quick tangent, and I swear I'm almost done with this review, we're like almost there. I wanted to address a quick criticism about the gear system. It's not a criticism I've heard from everyone, but I've heard it from enough people that I just wanted to give my opinion on it really quickly. Essentially, I've heard some people criticize the diegetic implementation of the gear in the game, basically saying that the Hulk having nanobots as gear or Tony Stark or Rich Man searching for gear takes them out of the immersion of the game. And while I can understand the logic being put forth in that criticism, I just wanted to say that doesn't bother me at all. I totally encourage people to analyze and scrutinize their media, especially video games, but the gear system is just a contrivance for a video game mechanic. So the story reasons for their existence really don't bother me so much. Now, the gear system isn't super complex, but all I can say is that while playing the game, I would get very excited whenever I'd find a new piece of gear with a bigger number. Let's compare it to a coin in Super Mario Bros. Coins don't necessarily make the entire game, but for the most part, they're a really good incentivizer. And I think the gear is a really good incentivizer in this game. It definitely could be deeper, and my understanding of it isn't as well defined as other players, but at the bare minimum, it motivates me to keep playing, and I get very excited when I get new pieces. No! No! I didn't want to die. I really enjoyed talking in detail about the game, but the main takeaway I want you to understand is that I just think the game is fun. The combat appeals to me very strongly, and I actually like the repetitious aspects of the game. I don't have a problem with the microtransactions or the live service aspects of the game because it doesn't really affect my experience at all. And as a Marvel Comics fan, I like all the little references and I like the nameplates, even though I think it's weird that you can purchase them with real money in the shop, and I like the comics and I like all the little stuff like that. In addition, I also don't think that I was deceived in any way like many seem to think. I wasn't interested in the game for a while until I was, and after playing the game, I wasn't surprised by the content. I felt like the various war table multiple streams and betas prepared me for the experience that I would have with the full product. But that being said, Avengers did have a very challenging launch, and I don't blame people for disliking the game. There are definitely valid reasons to be against the game, or to have conflict with the studios who created it. Most of all, I agree that if this game is going to be called a live service experience, that it needs more content more frequently. And while I personally think the pandemic can explain why many delays happen so frequently, I do think that communication should be a little bit more clear. But as for the endless grind that the game presents, I really enjoy it. Sure, there are improvements that I'd like to see, but if I was forced to play Avengers for the rest of my days offline, I would first of all question the circumstances that brought me to that scenario, and secondly, I wouldn't be too bothered about it. So yes, for the last time, I love Marvel's Avengers, and I give it 2 funds up. 2 funds. Like 2 funds up. Like one... I wanted to take a moment really quickly to talk about this game and why it's so important to me. Putting aside all the qualities that I think make it great or underappreciated by other video game players, it's been a really tough year. 2020 was really hard, and it could have very easily been delayed, this game. And I definitely know that the developers of the game have experienced a lot of pressure and stress because they couldn't meet certain deadlines because of the pandemic. But I'm really happy that they were able to put it out, and though it had a difficult launch, and though new content is delayed frequently, I'm really happy that this game was released in 2020. It made my pandemic a little bit more fun, and it gave me something to do when I couldn't really see the people I care about. It also gave me a new venue to talk about comic books, and it introduced me to a new community of people. This game is super special to me for very personal, biased reasons, and long story short, I love this game, and I love Monica Rappaccini. That's all I got for you. That's the whole video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I explained that correctly. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. I'm also on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at carrotscraps as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. So fun fact about Captain America, my first character that I maxed out at 150 power. I was playing for weeks looking for gear that was over 130 or looking for gear that was 150, only for one of my viewers on Twitch and chat to tell me that I needed to equip a major artifact and boost it to reach that final power ceiling. And I really appreciate that viewer, and I just think it's hilarious that I was playing for so long looking for something that didn't exist.